We'll get started, right? All right, it's up to order for the Historic Resource Board meeting. Let's have a call for stand up for a pledge of allegiance. Thank you.
Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, will the city clerk roll call, please?
Chairman Friels, Vice Chairman Medeiros,
Here.
Board Member Brewer,
Here.
Board Member Delgado,
Present.
Board Member Machain. A quorum is present.
Thank you. And for various reasons, according to what Don has just mentioned, we're going to have a short,
We couldn't hear it.
You can't hear me?
No, we couldn't hear Dawn.
Oh, good point. I'm glad you're asking. Don, would you please repeat what you just said earlier so that we can understand what we're going to do from here on out?
Sure. At one point, how does that sound? At one point, there you go. At one point this afternoon, we had one commissioner that could not attend and two that were ill, and one was traveling. And thank you, Commissioner Brewer, for agreeing to hear just the Planning Commission housing element items to keep the meeting brief so that we could return on the date specific, December 12th at 6:30 p.m. to take up the other two projects that are on our commission and HRB agenda. So the goal tonight was to get the critical issues out of the way in interest of the health and welfare of our commissioners and reschedule for a special meeting on December 12th.
Thank you, Don. City Manager, I should say. And now I'd like to need a motion to adjourn this meeting, regular meeting.
Make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I need a second.
I have a second.
All those in favor of adjourning this meeting and re-adjourning for next week on December the 12th, where we'll have a meeting for the Historic Resource Board on the 12th of December at 6:30 p.m., which is next Thursday.
Aye.
So, all in favor of adjourning this meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Historic Resource Board meeting for December 3rd is adjourned. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Any questions? Okay, we'll start the meeting for the Planning Commission meeting for today. We'll have a roll call, please. City Clerk?
Chairman Friels, Vice Chairman Machain, Board Member Brewer,
Here.
Board Member Delgado,
Present.
Board Member Medeiros.
Here.
A quorum is present.
Thank you. Staff, is there any public comments, or do we have anybody who want to come forward on public comments? None? Do you know of anybody? Okay. Item 3, which is informal project. Any potential and or further project applicant may present their project to the commission during informal project review for the purpose of gaining information as preliminary feedback only. No formal application is required and no action will be taken by the commission on any item at this time. Do we have anybody with an informal project review?
Mr. Chair, I have no applicants for an informal project review tonight.
Thank you. Okay, so consent items. Item number 4, consent items. And all matters listed under the consent agenda may be enacted by one motion authorizing actions indicated for those items so designated. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless requested by a member of the commission, a staff member, or a citizen. So that being said, is there any comments or discussion on this that anybody wants to bring forward? If not, I'd like to hear a motion to
Mr.
approve.
Chair, I would like to make a motion that we approve the item A, B, and C on the consent agenda.
Do we have a second?
Yeah, we have a second.
Okay. All those in favor of, to accept and approve items A, B, and C of the consent agenda? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So be it. Unanimous decision for consent items. Also, item number 5, public hearing item. Recommended to the City Council approval of the second addendum 2015 to 2019 housing element mitigated negative declaration in support of adoption of the 5th cycle housing element for a 4-year update, which is 2019 to 2023. Okay, staff report?
Mr. Chair, Todd, members of the, let me back up. Mr. Chair, sorry about that. Members of the commission, staff, Todd Kennedy, city staff here, Juan Bautista. Items 5A and B, just because they are related. Those items before you are components of the second 4-year housing element. Back at your September 3rd hearing is when recommendation of approval was passed on to City Council for the first 4-year housing element. That has already been done throughout the months of, with the implementing ordinance work. That's already been done through the months of September, October, and then November. Tonight before you is the final chapter of this project. It's the second 4-year housing element that takes us out to 2023 for recommendation on to council. So these two items go together. Once again, we have Martin Carver from EMC Planning Group to go ahead and present to you those items. So without further ado.
Thanks very much, Todd. Good evening, Chair, Vice Chair Medeiros, members of the Planning Commission. Martin Carver with EMC Planning.
Is your microphone on?
Seems like it.
Okay.
He's tall, that's why.
I know.
So, as Todd explained, this is really the second part of a process where we've undertaken update of the housing element twice this year. Now, the first housing element update process is complete, and we've received a letter from HCD, that's the California Department of Housing and Community Development, indicating that they've certified the first housing element that we did. So then the matter turns to doing that second piece of getting the update, what they would call the 4-year update. As you recall, the first one was due in 2015, so we finished that one. The second was due at the end of this year, so they just happened to be back to back by a matter of weeks. In this case, the second housing element is very much the same document that we submitted for the first one. There are a few differences, and I'll go into those on the next item, but I give you this preface because when it comes to doing the environmental review for compliance with the California Environmental Quality Act, we're required to look at the impacts of the new housing element. But in this case, really very minimal impacts. There are 4 new programs that are needed for compliance with state law that can be done anytime in the next year. And again, I'll dive into those a little bit deeper in the next item. But for CEQA, we concluded that an addendum that simply added to the project description of the environmental document that we wrote for the first housing element was sufficient in this case. So really, with that addendum, we're calling it the second addendum because we already already created one addendum. And so the item before you is to approve resolution PC 2019, and we've not numbered it yet, so it's XX, which recommends to the City Council that you approve second addendum San Juan Bautista 2015-2019 housing element mitigated negative declaration. And again, this is in support of the adoption of the second housing element, if you will. If you have questions about any of that, I'm happy to dig into it deeper, but I'll leave that at that. Okay, that concludes my staff report for item A.
Any questions? From the commission, before you sit down?
This is completing where we were out of compliance before with the state, and now we're not gonna go to any kind of meetings or anything, and they say, oh yeah, San Juan Bautista, they're the ones that are out of compliance with that, so we're not, is this completing that process?
That is exactly right. With this recommendation and then city council action later in the month, then you have done everything, the city has done everything that it needs to do to correct being late with the 2015. I mean, they put you on a 4-year cycle. The end of this housing element period is in 2023. It began in 2015, it ends in 2023, so you've had to do an interim, you've had to do a 4-year update, hence 2. So we finish this one, we go to 2023, we get that one done on time, you're back to an 8-year cycle. And at this point, no one can, in fact, even right today, no one can claim that you're out of compliance. You have a certified housing element and your next one is not due until the end of the month. So for a few weeks, you are golden. And we intend to adopt this so that when it comes January 1st, you can still say that. Okay?
A lot of hard work, I know, has gone into this, and thank you.
Yeah, well, working with your staff has been a pleasure and it's made it go real easily. And I have to say, I mean, Todd made the point earlier that Department of Housing and Community Development have really turned a new leaf up there, and they are working really hard to get local jurisdictions through this process. And so it's been a pleasure working with them. They've bent over backward to make this happen for the city. I mean, they turned around and did a review on our second housing element in a course of 3 days, really, because they couldn't formally give us feedback on that second housing element until they certified the first one. They certified the first one on November 22nd. They gave us a letter reviewing the second one on November 25th. So when does that happen?
Wow, never.
Never.
Any more questions from the commission? None? Okay, we'll open it up to the public. Have anybody, we'll have anybody who wants to hear from the public, anybody who's willing to come forward. Do we have any sign-ups?
I didn't fill out
You didn't
for,
sign- okay.
I can
It's
do
all right.
the Caravanc, San Juan Bautista. I think it might be helpful to hear B, for us to know what exactly is different or what has been added for the next 4-year cycle, so that we have a better understanding of what the EIR would be covering. Thank you.
If I
Yes,
may.
go ahead.
What I would suggest we do is that I can, in this item, explain in more detail what the changes are, so that you can actually approve this CEQA document, this addendum to your mitigated negative declaration.
Right.
Because once we get to the second item, you can't actually approve that second item until you've approved the first one. So, with your indulgence, I will provide a little more detail on what actually changed between the first and the second housing element. First of all, there's updated information on public participation. So we've included that. There's a new analysis and information on AB 2162 that requires supportive housing by right where multifamily and mixed use are allowed. There's updated information on changes to the zoning ordinance made during the course of the previous housing element. So all that activity that we undertook in September, October, November, we've now reported on it in the new housing element to say, okay, this is what has occurred. I mean, one of the things you have to do with there's a few things that you have to do with the new housing element. You have to be able to have a public workshop. You have to be able to demonstrate that you've done your public participation, even though it's only a matter of months or weeks. And you have to be able to report on the progress made on the last one. And so that's that piece where we've reported on all the activity that took place with all the ordinance adoptions and so on and so forth. So that's part of it as well. There's new analysis and information on SB 35 that exempts qualifying affordable housing projects from CEQA review and requires by right development. There's new information on short-term rental regulations. There's updated information, updated analysis of progress made on the last housing element. I just talked about that a little bit. And then finally, there are 4 new housing programs. And of all of this that I just explained, it's these 4 housing elements that have any potential at all to have an environmental impact. We've concluded that they don't. The others are really new information, but don't have any force and effect. They're not new policy. Nothing grows from them except they satisfy HCD's need for information. Those 4 new housing programs are as follows. First, there's one that addresses supportive housing by right. The second, low barrier navigation centers, which is actually a form of supportive housing, but a term of art, low barrier navigation centers. It was new to me this year, I have to say. SB 35 permit streamlining is addressed. And then finally, a couple of months ago, we adopted an ordinance on reasonable accommodations. This is to allow people with disabilities to come and say, we need to, for example, build a wheelchair ramp to our house, but this wouldn't be allowed in a front yard setback otherwise. I'm not saying that it is in this case, but as an example. And so the state requires that the city have a process where there can be relief from planning and zoning and building regulations for people with disabilities to be able to provide various kinds of things that they need in their housing. So you did that in the last couple of months and put that ordinance in place. Now the state is saying, please advertise it. Please advertise that you put this ordinance in place. That's what the new program is about. So those are the 4 new programs. Again, all of them are in response to new state law that are requiring basically a loosening of regulation to provide an easier path for these forms of supportive housing and reasonable accommodation. Does that help? That's it. That's really it. We have the 4 new programs. We have new information. We've reported on the new public participation that we've undertaken. So really, very, very much the last housing element with just a few minor additions.
Thank you. Any other? Yes. Yeah. Sure.
Cara Vunk, San Juan Bautista. Under this new 4-year program, do we have to identify additional numbers of housing for low, moderate, and what was the other one? Low, moderate, and very low housing, like we did for the last one that we did?
Chair Medeiros. The quick answer is no, and thanks for the question, because it's actually, another way of expressing this. There's a few things that needed to happen. What doesn't happen with this 4-year update is that there is no new regional housing needs allocation. There's no new RENA that the regional housing agency has, the regional council of governments has put forth. So there is no new set of numbers. There's no exercise where we had to go out and find additional vacant sites. The list of vacant and available sites that was in the last housing element is exactly the same as this one. It's been found to be complete and adequate to serve the city's needs, and will remain so through 2023 when the Council of Governments again provides a new regional housing needs allocation, and then we'll go through the process again of looking at what sites we have. Is it enough? Do we need to find more? Et cetera, but that's in 2023, not now. So the quick answer, no.
Thank you. Any more questions, or anybody from the public would like to come forward? None? Okay, I'm closing. Public hearing. Okay, I'll bring it back to the commission. Do we have any questions? Do we have any comments at this time?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I apologize, I didn't understand number 3, what you were saying.
Permit streamlining.
What was the one before that?
Low barrier navigation
That's
centers.
the one. Sorry, what does that mean?
In working with homeless in Salinas, we were modeling a program called Navigation Centers that would help people transition from living in non-suitable housing or tents or on the ground into a multi-service center, helping them navigate through social services, mental health, social security benefits, and finally meeting a housing counselor and getting housing. That's what they used to refer to as wraparound services. So it's not just going to one person or one nonprofit. You have a cadre collected in one area, and a caseworker is assigned your case, and you are navigated then through the system and hopefully into permanent housing.
And that's gonna happen in San Juan Bautista?
It now has the potential to happen. We've enabled it to happen where in other communities they've adopted laws that did just the opposite. So now the state is requiring, to avoid a barrier to establishing these, that we are enabling it to happen. So no, there are no proposals at City Hall right now for this service.
No, thank you.
No.
You have any?
No.
Okay. I got a question. In the documents that I received in the email, there was a lot of strike-throughs as far as the information that was provided. Did I get a strange copy of, and items in red?
No, in fact, to make it particularly easy for the Department of Housing and Community Development to review and to be able to immediately see what changed from the last one, we actually provided them, typically we'd provide a clean copy, but in this case, we provided a copy that had strikeout and underlined so that they could see immediately what changed. So if there was an old reference to some kind of a process that really was about the last housing element and not this one, it got stricken. And if there was a new reference to, a workshop that we held or whatever, or a new policy, that would be in underline and all of those places it was in reading just for the ease.
That's the final version that's going forward.
Well, we will actually clean it up. Once City Council takes final action, we will produce a document that strikes out, removes all the underline and strikeout, and results in a clean document, so that you have it for your records and for the library and the like, but it won't have that underline and strikeout at that point.
Any other discussions? You think we're ready to make a motion? That's it? Okay, so somebody would like to make a motion to approve this resolution. Who's gonna do that?
I'd like to approve, make
Make
a
a
motion
motion.
to approve a resolution, I'll be finding those. 2019-24, recommending to the City Council approve of the second addendum 2015 to 2019 housing element mitigated negative declaration in support of adoption of the fifth cycle housing element 4-year update 2019 to 2023.
Do I have a second motion?
I'll second that,
You second it?
yeah.
Okay, so let's vote on it for approval. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? None. And the ayes have it. Motion has approved resolution 2019-24. Thank you. All right, item B, recommend to City Council adoption of the fifth cycle housing element 4-year update for the year 2019 to 2023.
Vice
Staff
Chair.
report.
Thank you. Vice Chair Medeiros, thank you very much. So this item now is the actual approval of the housing element. Before we were just dealing with the environmental review of it. Now we're actually recommending that you approve resolution PC 2019. Again, Laura may know the numbering, but I don't, so I'm going to call it XX. And this is recommending approval of the City Council of the San Juan Bautista fifth cycle housing element 4-year update 2019-2023. Again, the last one was certified on November 22nd, and they did a very quick turnaround. We've revised the document. They've indicated that this revised document is good to go and that they'll certify it as is with all the underline and strikeout. I've already went through all the revisions that were made, and we've talked about that. So there really is nothing left on my end. Of course, any questions you have, but the recommendation is that you approve the resolution making the recommendation.
Thank you. Any questions? Nothing? Okay, I'll open it up for public hearing. Anybody who wants to say anything, come forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Caraval, San Juan Bautista. Can you remind me, under the one that was just certified, how many housing units we are identified that we need to build? Do you remember the number?
Yeah. Something like 16 or something.
16?
I think it was
Okay.
17.
I was just,
I don't know what the number.
I think it was 17. I
You can
think.
look it up.
I looked it up. I thought it was 17.
17?
I think, I'm not, because I was reading the Casa Rosa stuff, and it
okay.
said it would
I
add
think
3.
that's
Oh,
Oh,
yeah,
yes,
yeah.
okay, so that's,
So I have it here, it's on page 136 of your packet. It's 5 extremely low, 5 very low, and 6 low income, but it's also considered low income, so we have 8 moderate on the list as well.
We have what?
8 moderate income units
8
on the list as well,
moderate,
yeah.
okay.
It's page 136 of the packet, page 1-2 of the housing element. And then above moderate is 17, for a total of 41.
41, no, 17 was moderate,
Okay.
41, okay.
Right.
I remember moderate, I was
So
reading
so
that Casa
16 of
Rosa.
those are the very the lower income side.
I don't know, yeah.
No, that's
That
all
was
I
it?
wanted to know. Thank you.
Okay. I mean, the public has a copy of this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it should be in there. Okay. Anybody else? Okay, I'll close the public hearing then. Bring it back to the commissioners. Have any questions, comments? Sure. No. Do I hear a motion to approve?
Okay, I do a motion to approve the resolution 2019-25,
Yes.
recommending the city council adoption of the general planning housing element 4-year update consensus with section 65580 ET CEQA of the California Government Code.
Do I hear a second?
A second.
Okay, we'll go ahead and vote for, does everybody approve approve this motion to approve resolution 2019-25, recommending the city council adoption of the general plan housing element for your update consistent with section 65580 of the California Government Code? All those approve?
Aye.
All those who do not approve? Motion is accept, resolution 2019-25. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to hear a motion to close tonight's meeting for, pardon me?
We're going, sorry, Chair. We need, just like the housing resource, we need to adjourn until December 12th at
Right.
6:30. Right, okay.
I'll make that motion, yeah.
You use the word close.
Will somebody please make a motion to adjourn this meeting until December the 12th at 6:30 PM on Thursday next week?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn this meeting forward to Thursday, December 12th at 6:30.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved to adjourn. Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much for coming tonight.
Laura, can we go ahead and keep our tablets until next?
Here, Laura. I won't be.